Well, hello, church family. It's Thursday. I know I haven't done a video in a while, but it's just been kind of crazy getting everything settled in, moving, and all the changes going on here. And so I want to keep doing these, even though we started Wednesday nights back up last night. Last night was our first one, first Wednesday, I think maybe since February for me, because I was off the first week of March. I'd gone to a short conference, and so I think Richard taught for me that night. And then the next week was school spring break, and of course, after spring break, school never restarted, and we never did back to either. But last night was our first night back in, and it was good to see everyone. And again, we're doing it in the sanctuary. Hopefully, have the capability to stream that to everyone. But anyway, I wanted to keep doing these. I know that some of you really enjoyed them. Again, if you haven't, just delete, right? Move past. But hopefully each week I can talk a little bit about things that are maybe going on with the church, and then also maybe hitting some things theologically and just kind of hitting some different. I thought I'd just do these on Thursdays, do normal Wednesday night, and then on Thursday just a little something brief, kind of short. And so, and maybe even make these a little shorter than what they were originally. But today I wanted to talk just briefly about the Lord's Supper. If those of you know, I'd mentioned that we might do it last week, first Sunday in June. We did not. My hope is that maybe we can figure out a way to do it in July. But here's what's going on with the Lord's Supper. And before I say these things, I just want to say too, every church has their own plan. And what I'm about to say may differ with some other churches do, and that's completely up to them. But I wanted to share about why we have not done it yet. And that answer is simply because I'm not sure we can do it well right now in the current circumstances. And what that has to do with just kind of the sanitary things that are being encouraged for us right now, as far as we really want to make things touchless. And then, so how do you do the Lord's Supper in that situation? How do you? And so here's the thing. So sanitary wise, touchless. That's what's really been encouraged, right? As far as let's just not make contact. Let's maintain distance. That sort of thing. Theologically, what we're doing with the supper, number one, we're trying to remember, right? Do this in remembrance of me. And so when we take the supper, it says we proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. And so the body and the bread and the blood and the cup, the juice, representation, those things, we proclaim his death until he comes. But secondly, you hear it just in the fact that we're using bread and juice, right, to symbolize his body and his blood. There's a symbolic nature to the Lord's Supper. And then finally, I would say in 1 Corinthians, which is really where we get into kind of some teaching on the Lord's Supper. This is where Paul says, if you take the supper in an unworthy manner, some have even died. So the Lord's Supper is serious. But what he says there, what the main problem in 1 Corinthians, it's in chapter 12, is that they weren't doing it together. He says, the supper is meant to show that everyone is one body. And I think he says that in 1 Corinthians 10. 10 through 12 is kind of where he's dealing with this. And he's really hitting the 1 Corinthian church, or the Corinthian church, on a lack of unity. And he says the supper is one of those things that's meant to bring us together. Because it's to remind us that we're all saved by Jesus in exactly the same way, right? None of us have earned it. We are all believing and trusting and turning from sin. That we're all being saved in exactly the same way. And so in 1 Corinthians, he says, some people are eating before everyone gets there. Some people are, I think he's exaggerating a little bit, but he says, some are eating so much that they're drunk, and then some aren't getting any. And so really he addresses there this idea that the Lord's Supper is meant to bring unity to the church. And we used to do this, and some churches still do in some form or fashion, but they had one piece of bread and they had one cup, right? Symbolizing Jesus' body and his blood, and everyone ate and drank from that. Now, that when we do the Lord's Supper, the deacons take the one loaf of bread that's cooked and they break it up ahead of time. And so that you're eating pieces of the same kind of loaf. To be real honest right now, the prepackaged Lord's Supper is kind of a big hit right now because it does meet the sanitary things, but I just pastorally just didn't see how, all of us getting our prepackaged cup, and how does that bring unity? How does all of us doing that together, push us together? And here's the thing too, we used to all take one loaf and one cup. Everybody did that, not just the Catholic Church. That was everybody, because they saw the unity that the supper was supposed to pull. And we quit doing that back in around the Spanish flu, 1918, 100 years ago. Early 20s is when all of a sudden we realized about germs and everything. And so even then, 100 years ago, that's when we'll go to the individual cup. And then probably too, the individual pieces of bread kind of already broken up and separated in the plate, and everybody can kind of take their own. And so 100 years ago, we took a very biblical, it's an ordinance. We have baptism, the Lord's Supper as Baptists. We took a biblical ordinance and we kind of adapted it. And I'm not sure in a good way. And so what I'm seeing right now in 2020 is, well, we were 100 years ago from that one, and now we want to change the Lord's Supper even further to make it less of the symbolism and symbolic unity that I think was originally intended. And so I just could not figure out a way that we could check all the boxes last Sunday. And I'm not sure we can do it in July. We're going to try and figure it out. I know over time some of the sanitary things will be lifted and eased a little bit. But that's not my primary concern right now as your pastor. My primary concern is hey, how can we do this more biblically? And so I'm actually taking time to rethink even the bread and the cup. How can we do these so that we see them as one body, one blood, the body of Jesus, all of us partaking of this together? How can we do that in a sanitary fashion? And again, because they used to all pass that one loaf. It started, and you broke off a piece and passed it to your neighbor, and they broke off a piece and passed it. And they used to dip in the cup, and kind of, I don't see us all drinking out of one cup and wiping and moving down. But how can we use the ordinance the way it was intended to be? And I think the answer to that is making it more symbolic and reflective of the body and blood in Jesus, but doing it in such a way that it really pushes us to remember that Jesus has died for each of us, and that we are all in this together as the church. And so breeding unity. How can we use the supper to breed unity? And so that's why we've held off. And so those are some of my thoughts on the supper as far as how to take it. Justin and I have discussed it several times, and again, I may be different. I know a lot of churches are still taking it, but I'm just, as your pastor, saying, hey, I know what it's supposed to represent. I know what we're supposed to be teaching and moving and pushing through it. How can we do that? How can we do it well? And just did not think that we could do it well this past week, and so we held off. Again, the goal is still to shoot for 1st of July, but again, doing it in a Christ-honoring, biblical way that edifies and grows the church. That's what we're trying to do, and so that's what we're doing to the supper. All right, we proclaim the Lord's death when we take it, and so that's certainly good, but there's also other elements to it, so we want to do it all well. That's my goal always, is whatever we do here at First Baptist Coleman, let us do it well, all right, in a God-honoring way, in a way that's edifying and teaching and growing to you. So church, hope you've enjoyed this little brief. Again, I'm going to try and keep them short, but that's also difficult for me. But hopefully each week we can kind of send these out and keep talking and discussing some of these theological topics. All right, hope to see you Sunday, church, either online or in person. Have a great rest of the week.